Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Yep. Today's ink I have in sample form. It is by Private Reserve. It is Dakota Red. It's a bright, intense, vibrant red color. Yes. Two pens I used were these. Apparently I felt like being thematic. This is an AG Spalding Bros pen, and it has a medium nib, although these nibs are manufactured in Japan. This one I'd say is actually fairly close to a Western medium. And then for some contrast, I have this Pilot 78G in double broad, and of course both the single and double broads of the 78G are actually stubs. So there you go. Now let's look at some comparisons. Here is Dakota Red, and here is my go-to red for bright color and non-permanence, all that stuff. The infamous, the classic, Sheaffer Script Red. Fairly close, maybe a little bit more orange in the script, a little bit more pink in the Dakota. Next up, Noodler's Nikita Red. Maybe a little bit lighter. Next up, Waterman's Audacious Red, which I actually just finished testing and is less saturated. And lastly, Hoa und Klinger's Fernambach. I don't know. Never heard that word before in my life. As you can tell, that one is definitely a bit lighter and a bit less saturated. But where it's laid on more thinly, it does take on sort of these slightly pink undertones. So, alright, now brace yourself. Chromatography is coming. Alright, so this one on the right with the little D in the corner is the one that I let dry. Which is not how you're supposed to do it, but I do what I want. Now, this one is the one that I did the way you're supposed to, where you put the line of ink and then essentially instantly drop it in the water. You can definitely tell where that line of ink was, and we have sort of this light, sort of chalky pink color going up before we get into a slightly more dense red. And then the one that I let dry, the line is a bit darker, there's less space for the chalkiness, and then the stuff at the top is less distinctly dark. Other than that, alright, chemical test. Water really got it moving. Bleach, or at least 1/3 bleach, did not get it moving as much as I thought. As you might be able to tell, it actually sort of turned it a bright orange, but didn't completely get rid of all of it. And actually, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I was really scrubbing it because I was expecting it to just disappear, and that is not what happened. Ammonia pen flush got it moving fairly well, however I think the ammonia reacted with the paper, so it mostly just sunk in. Hydrogen peroxide kind of got it moving a bit, but that also started to affect the paper, so, Yep. Paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yep. Yeah, it's a bright, vibrant red. That's what it is. I sort of don't know what else to say about it. As I say here, it reminds me of Ackermann 19, which is Rhodia's Plush. And actually, it would have been the 5th option on here, but I usually keep it down to 4. So, it is quite similar to Rhodia's Plush. Now, the AG Spalding in medium took 16 seconds to dry. The double broad stub took 23, but bear in mind, there's the edge of that stub on these downstrokes. So, yeah. If you look at these smears, you can tell they're fairly significant, and that's because this is actually a kind of wet flowing ink. Here I say it's a 6 out of 10. By the end, it felt more like a 6.5. So, it's moving. Now, there is some shading, as we will see. Not a ton, but some, and actually where it's not laid on more heavily, it starts to take on sort of that chalky dark pink color, which admittedly I've never made a secret of. I hate the color pink, so that wasn't awesome for me, but if that doesn't bother you, it's here, so cool. You know, like it's a thing. Maybe you like that, go for it. Anyways, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. very... Now, water test, it did dye the page a fair bit, and a lot of it did let go, but not all of it. There is a little bit of something there. Perhaps if you had to recover that, you could. It did not come out the back. Next up is Fabriano Eco Qua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. I love this stuff. Yeah, we kind of have a little bit more of the same. That AG Spalding in medium took 15 seconds. The stub took 23. We have a mild sort of a halo effect around the wettest parts with the 78G. But yeah, so I like that. I like the contrast it creates. I think it makes it even more readable. Not that it would be much of a problem considering how bright in color this ink is. So there's that. Yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. I was kind of hoping there would be sheen in those halos, but we're not really, we don't have any, so that's unfortunate. It is a bright, intense red. Water test, it dyed the page. There is some left, but it is very light. Got very, very light. The stub, because of the way the stub works and how it sort of drags ink around, it's kind of uneven, but that's kind of predictable. Now, next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. However, I feel I should acknowledge that this piece of Rhodia came from the bottom of a block, and the longer paper is exposed to air, the more the air affects it, and it affects the performance, and so generally towards the end of the block, you know, once you've worked your way down, it can affect the performance. So this is not ideal, but wanted to point it out because we do have some spots on the back of very near bleed, and I don't feel that's entirely fair, and I say this is environmental anomalies because I mean, yeah, oxygen started to affect it. So just wanted to point that out. It is not because the ink is particularly aggressive or violent, it is because time ravages us all. Now, that AG Spalding in medium took 14 seconds to dry. The stub took 22. Again, we have a little bit of mild shading. It's fairly subtle. And again, we have sort of a dark halo around the wettest parts, which is easiest to see in that stub. It is a slightly wet flowing ink. But yeah, there's no spread, there's no sheen, there's no echo. I see that there's some spots of feathering, but as I was looking this over before I started recording, I really couldn't find spots of feathering except for the eye in quick at the top. And even that is not super intense. And I was struggling to find anything else. But I thought I should let you know. Water test, yeah. Again, because this is environmentally affected paper, you know, oxygen, it's aged. You might get better results on a fresher sheet, which might be why it sort of takes on a bit of a woolliness. But you do have something remaining. It did dye the page a little bit. It did get much, much lighter. I don't know, maybe if you were really determined or you really had to cover it, you could. Next up is Tomoe River paper. This stuff is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo. And yeah, we kind of get most of that stuff. We do not get sheen. I laid it on very thick in the scrubby because a lot of times an ink that'll give you a dark halo, that halo can turn into a sheen, and I wanted to see if given enough of an oomph, if we could get that. We do not get that. There is no sheen. That medium AG Spalding and Brothers pen took 22 seconds to dry. The stub took 30, and we do have a dark outline on here. Come on. It is kind of nice. I like that effect. We do get a good breadth of shading, but again, this particular ink where it's laid on thin, we do get sort of a chalky pink color, which again, personally I don't like, but if that's your thing, you will love this. Yes. Now, because it's Tomoe River, we're not going to see bleed, we're not going to see feather, we're not going to see spread. There may be some echo, but I feel like it's mostly in the scrubby, and in that case that was me, because as I said, I was laying it on very thick, trying to see if I could sort of like force out any sheen under extreme circumstances. Maybe the stub, but honestly I don't No, you'd have to be quite sensitive. Now, this paper loves to let it slide away when you add more water. It kind of did, but it also kind of didn't. I was expecting more to wash away. It did dye the page a little bit, but you also might be able to tell that even though this is a very light, chalky pink, it's also very even. You know, it's not as patchy as some of the other ones we've seen. So, I don't know. Maybe if you had to recover that, you could. Now, for the next 3 tests, I only used that AG Spalding in medium, except to write the name. And this is pretty much the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. It could very well be the world's worst paper. Yeah, it's awful. And as you can probably tell already, we have no sheen, we have no shading at all. Shading is all gone. And we get a good bit of spread. If we look at the line width on Tomoe River versus here, there's definitely a broadening of the line. We have feathering. Yeah. We have spread, we have feathering, we have no shading. Took 3.5 seconds to dry. It's still a fairly intense color, although, as I say here, it does almost look more like a very intense dark pink. Yeah, so this is a wet flowing ink, and that is a European medium equivalent nib, and it's a bright color, and this is awful paper. So we have a lot of bleed, and as you can tell, because you can see tons of these little tiny dots coming all the way out the back, which is unfortunate, but there you go. And a lot of show through everywhere else, which is not great. And I really wish I could find a better way to show this, just because the paper freaked out so much. Yeah, this paper can freak out when you add water, and I definitely say that's what happened here. It started to act like chromatography paper, as you might be able to see. It tried to sort of pull more of the water in and up, and yeah, we got intense spread in the water test, so it just sort of like leached outward. It got lighter, it feathered and exploded. That would be the opposite of fun to try and recover, but there's something there-ish, kind of. It's hideous and ugly. Now, next up is Mead Notebook Paper. This stuff is very common for school children in the United States. This is the kind you find in a spiral notebook. And lately, this stuff has been feathering like crazy. And sadly, that is very much what happened here. But I just thought I should point out that this paper seemingly loves to do that anyway. And I don't know if mine is just particularly susceptible to it, but yeah. Not great. However, we don't have anywhere near as much spread as we did on the 20-pound. So there is that. However, we do have much more feathering, which is unfortunate. But we also have no bleed on here. We do have show through, but look, even the darkest parts when I bring it in, see how hazy it is still? How light and opaque? That's because although it's sinking into the paper, it is not reaching the back, and it is not coming out the back, and it's certainly not getting on the page below. So yeah, there's that, at least. And definitely no shading. It took 3 seconds to dry. It's still an intense color. It's still like an intense dark pink, reddish thing. So there's that. But yeah, could be worse. Could be worse. This paper does tend to freak out when you add water. And here it kind of did. It didn't freak out as much as a 20-pound, that's for sure. I mean, that's a train wreck. But honestly, it was weird how much it didn't dye the page. It feathered and exploded a little, but I wanted you to see it's particularly down here, which is the edge of the page. So that kind of makes sense, but could have been a lot worse. It's still fairly there and fairly dark. I don't know. If you had to recover that, I think maybe you could. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I hate because it's awful. They make you pay a lot of money for it. And you can probably tell already that this is a train wreck. Yeah. Now, yes, it is a European medium kind of nib, and it is a wet flowing ink. But when a notebook of this size costs about $12, no. Especially when you're trying to market them to like artisty people. Like that's I'm literally biting my tongue. Now, we have insane wooliness and feathering. It is hideous, it is distracting, it is ugly. It is just hideous. 4 seconds to dry. You can see the pulp they mashed into paper. You can see the texture of the... I hate this stuff. Anyways, we have a lot of bleed. Now I just want to show you the back of Mead, back of Moleskine. See how dark these dots are? That is because this stuff did reach the back. Not only did it reach the back, it came out the back, and it got onto the page below. So it ruined the front, it ruined the back, and it ruined the next page. I hate this paper. Anyways, it's hideous. Now, water test, yeah. It dyed the page, it feathered, it exploded, it got lighter, it's starting to overlap. It's a furry cactus monster nightmare creature. It's terrible. There you go. For your consideration, Private Reserve Dakota Red. It is a bright, intense, vibrant red. It is wet flowing. It has some subtle shading, no sheen, fairly well behaved. If you're just looking for a bright, intense red, it's certainly that. I'm just going to leave that there. Yep. I'm the master of subtlety. Anyways, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.